Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward, and this is Face to Face. Our guest this week is artist, writer, and politician Aaron Paquette. First elected to Edmonton City Council in 2017, Paquette is now in his second term, representing Ward Dene in the city. Prior to running for City Hall, Paquette worked as an award-winning author and artist. Councillor Paquette, great to have you with us this week. I know it's been a busy one for you.
Yeah, it's definitely been a busy one, to say the least.
Quite the week or two for the city of Edmonton, making national headlines over the clearing of homeless encampments. On Tuesday, Council declared a housing and homeless emergency. How will this help the people who have nowhere to go?
You know, Dennis, I think that the intention was to raise awareness, but as you mentioned, this was already national news. So I'm not sure if it does anything because the declaration doesn't carry any additional powers or initiatives with it. So we'll see what happens out of it. But hopefully we get some response from other orders of government to help with this. And in fact, we're already seeing some response from the provincial government with plans that they had in the works for the past few months that was rolled out and the council was informed of the day before the declaration of an emergency.
And we'll get to some of that provincial support in a minute here. But, you know, initially the province, who you would think would have a major role in this, kind of scoffed at the declaration. Prior to this announcement here in the last 24 hours or so, has the province been providing much assistance?
Well, here's the thing. I understand why they scoffed at it because the declaration carries no extra powers, no extra funding, no extra action. It was simply a statement. And so I can see where they're coming from on that. And frankly, part of my concern about the declaration is that at the time, the room was filled with Indigenous people and allies and supporters who really wanted to see immediate action to help folks on the streets. And unfortunately, the city of Edmonton had no immediate action to give. And so there was some frustration from some members of the audience who were in chambers that maybe this was just yet another government promise that had no weight to it. Right. So that was a little bit of a challenge.
Well, let's take a bit of a step back here. According to the mayor, there are about 3,100 homeless people in the city of Edmonton, double pre-pandemic numbers. What do you think is behind the doubling of the number of people who are living on the streets, and who are these people?
Yeah, so before COVID hit, we were actually progressing on lowering the amounts of homeless people. We're actually getting people into homes and actually getting better at it. But when COVID hit, obviously people lost jobs. There was a lot of different financial challenges people had. Some people fell deeper into addictions because they couldn't get the supports in real time that they needed. And so we saw this explosion of numbers. And so what we do know is that 55 to 60% of those folks are Indigenous. And then we also have 40,000 homes in Edmonton that are on the verge of a crisis. If they have a bad month, a lot of those folks will find themselves homeless, and 1 in 3 of those homes are also Indigenous. So these are numbers that are really concerning, and I believe it's an ongoing impact of colonization and residential schools and systemic issues with the inability to fulfill treaty promises.
Indeed, I hope we touch on that a bit more here. A human rights group was trying to put an end to the dismantling of the camps. Those efforts failed in court this week. Why did the camps need to be dismantled, and why during an absolute deep freeze?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. Why it had to be done during the coldest time of the year, I honestly couldn't tell you. What people might not know is that municipalities do not direct their police services. That is by provincial law. What municipalities do is fund police services. And then there's a independent body that oversees police. But what I think that I heard as the reasons for decamping folks was that in certain camps that have been around for a long time, you get a buildup, unfortunately, of human waste that causes health concerns. And we heard about the Shigella outbreak last year, for example. And you might have a proliferation of used needles. And so it starts to become more and more unsafe. And unfortunately, for example, one of the camps that was cleared during the cold weather, there had been a propane explosion and someone burned to death. And they'd also in another camp. And then in this camp as well, there was a body found. Someone had died and no one knew when and no one had noticed. And so there were really deep concerns. Now, the folks who were decamped weren't just kicked away. There were supports offered them. There was, we can take it to a shelter. We can take you to wherever you need to go. If they did an assessment, if you need to go to the hospital, that's where you're going. So there were supports in place, but I guess there was that concern. The last concern that we're hearing from EPS is that there is, folks in camps are a vulnerable population. And some people understand that and know that and want to help, but some people see that and see it as easy targets. And so these vulnerable people get preyed on by criminal organizations. And so as that takes root, there's a concern there as well. So, and what you'll find is after everything is cleaned up, then if people want to, they end up going back and camping again because they just have nowhere else to go.
Yeah. You know, I think the issues happening in Edmonton are front and center, but this has been happening right across the country. People here in Winnipeg, I know, don't always feel safe going to a shelter. Where did all these people that were removed from these encampments go? Did everybody find a place to go?
Yeah, so that you're exactly right. They don't feel comfortable going to the shelters, and there could be lots of reasons for that. Some of it is institutional, that people, especially Indigenous people, have lost their trust and their faith in institutions and don't feel safe, right? The other aspect is maybe they can't take their dog, who they love, their only companion, or they can't even go with their actual partner, their spouse. And so there's all these concerns. And so that would be reasons that people don't go. In the city, we developed a minimum standards for shelters that we deliver to the province so that people would rather be warm and safe than stay outside in -40 weather. The good news is that yesterday, the province announced that they will be allowing partners to go together to shelters. They will be allowing pets. They will actually have Indigenous leaders and elders and workers there. And if people don't feel safe at one shelter, they can go to the shelter that Enoch opened. And Treaty 6 has been a part of all of these conversations. So it's a really great development. And if it works, it's going to be really positive for people who are trying to get off the streets.
Well, the province did announce $13 million for this place that people can go. But Alberta's Public Safety Minister Mike Ellis also had this to say, that action had to be taken to close down the camps because they were rampant with organized crime. Quote, these encampments have turned into gang-run drug camps that enable drug dealing, human trafficking, rape, crime, and violence. That was the minister's quote there. What are your thoughts on those comments?
Well, all of those things are happening. In fact, people in encampments have been, they get shaken down for money just to stay. There's, as I said, there are criminal elements that take advantage of these folks. I wouldn't have said it the same way the minister would, because by and large, the majority of people in encampments are not obviously criminals. They're just people who are down on their luck or need help. That's it. Yeah, so while the minister is technically correct, I definitely wouldn't have put it in the same terms. But that's different, I guess, different ways of looking at things.
All right. Well, the $13 million was announced by the province of Alberta, as I said, for a new navigation and support center. Will this be a big help?
Yeah, this is going to be a massive help. And the reporting I've gotten so far is that the majority of people who are being decamped are choosing to go to this center because it's, no one's being forced to in any way, which is a positive. And there's a number of things that can happen there. They can get triaged. So if they have to go to the hospital, they'll go to the hospital. If they need a shelter, they'll go to the shelter. They'll get put on a waiting list for homes, which can't be built fast enough, in my opinion. And there's another aspect which I thought was really interesting, because when I go to encampments and when I walk through the streets and I talk to folks, sometimes they say, I'm stranded. I came here for treatment, or I came here with a friend, or I thought there was a better opportunity for me. But here I am on the streets and I can't get back to my family. I can't get back home. So the province is actually going to assist those people if they want to go home, and ensure that at home there's a warm welcome. So there's social services ready right when they arrive, and they'll get all the help they need if that's what they choose to do. And of course, no one has to go home if they want to, but for a lot of folks, they seem to be really, really happy that they can get back to their family.
Yeah, some good sounding initiatives there. Well, speaking of initiatives, earlier this week we spoke very briefly, but about the idea of Indigenous-led and managed encampments. You know, dismantle them all you want. These encampments are going to come back. Can you tell us more about that plan and how an Indigenous-led encampment would work?
Yeah, so obviously, right out of the gate, I should say that like the best scenario is that we don't have encampments. That
Right.
people actually have a home, they have a place to go, they have the care and help they need. That is the ideal, and that's what I think we should be working toward. But in the meantime, while we wait for more federal funding, while we wait for more provincial funding, because your listeners and your watchers might know that housing is a constitutional and legislative responsibility of the province, and they have the tools and the funds to do it. So while we're waiting on that, what happens to folks if there have to be encampments? What does that look like? And one thing that we're working on at the City of Edmonton is, can we work with Indigenous communities so that it's Indigenous-led and city and province supported with garbage pickup, with help, with warmth and food and all of these things, in order for people to be able to survive, and not just survive, but also thrive, and get them into healthier pathways, have elders on site, and have appropriate ceremony and cultural aspects to it, as a way to build trust with folks, so that they can see that, you know what, I can actually engage with this and I'll be safe. So that would be the way that we would want to go forward if we have to see the reality of encampments.
Councillor Paquette, much more to talk about here, including your life before politics. We're going to do that. We just have to step aside for a quick break, and then we'll continue the conversation here on Face to Face. Stick around. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guest this week is award-winning author, artist, and politician Aaron Paquette. And Councillor Paquette, prior to becoming a politician, you were also known as one of the premier Indigenous artists in Canada. Your work's been on display around the world and in some very prominent places. Was art always a passion of yours?
Yeah, it was. Ever since I was a kid, I remember at 5 years old, pulling all the clothes out of the drawers because we didn't have paper. And I started drawing on the drawers, and then putting the clothes back, hoping my mom wouldn't notice. Years later, she said, I totally knew what you're doing, but, we wanted you to have something to do. Because like a lot of folks, we grew up very poor, and we didn't always have all the things that we wanted or even needed, but we did everything as a family to try to make things work, as many families do.
Well, if somebody has those drawers in their home, I'm sure they might be able to fetch $1 or $2 for those now. You mentioned you growing up not having much. Was art quite an outlet for yourself then?
Yeah, it really was. It was a way where I could express myself and sort of touch into something that at the time I didn't know what it was, but it made me feel safe and secure. And, I think that what I was touching into was just that continuation of a cultural tradition and a way of showing and expressing sort of the beauty of what our people have to offer. Yeah.
We could see some of your work behind you, but are there paintings or work that you're most proud of?
Yeah, I think that one of the pieces I'm most proud of is actually in the city of Edmonton at the Royal Alberta Museum, and it's about the grandfather teachings. And so it's a series of horses, each representing one of the teachings, but it also has other deeper teachings that, unless you know those teachings, you won't detect it. But I've been able to go and talk to elders and stand in front of the piece, and uh, they teach me even more about what I didn't even know was in the work. And so, yeah, that's one of the pieces that I love the most because it can really transmit a lot of cultural knowledge, and it also loosens up the elders into telling me even more stuff, which I always love. And by the way, shout out to all the cookums that I know who are watching. They asked me to do that, so
Nice. Well, and like art is so amazing like that, like you mentioned there. Art also played an important role in the Idle No More movement, and a lot of that work was yours. So,
yeah.
what are your reflections on Idle No More?
I think that was a really wonderful and profound moment in history, and it really galvanized a lot of folks. And what happened there has informed everything that still goes on today. And so I think that it also showed a way of protest that you don't see a lot in the world. And that protest was that we don't have to harm each other to make our point. We can bring people in, and that was the whole goal of it. And I think we successfully managed to do that in really remarkable ways. And really, I think, instill a lot of pride in youth to see that the folks that they see in the news look like them, and that the message that they deliver was one where you can always be proud of it, no matter what, for generations to come.
Well, it wasn't that long after Idle No More that you decided to take your first run at politics as an NDP candidate in the 2015 federal election. Was it an easy transition going from, having so much involvement in this grassroots movement to jumping into what many would view as a colonial system?
Exactly. No, it was not easy, and it still isn't easy. But one of the things I looked at was we were just really fighting for better policy to make sure that water was safe for generations to come. And I thought, well, maybe if I can get into government, I can start to affect that policy. And if I can't, then at least I can report back to everyone, here's everything I tried and here's the barriers, and have that knowledge from inside the system. Um, I wasn't ultimately successful at that run, but in the process we were able to talk about those issues a lot. So yeah, I'm actually really proud that at least we made the attempt.
Did you have some people questioning you on the decision to run for federal politics when you'd had such an involvement with Idle No More?
You'd think so, but what we got instead was a ton of community support. And if anyone questioned, it was just concern for going into, I remember one person said, going into a pit of vipers. And so be careful.
Right. Well, you were successful in your run just a couple of 2 years later, running for Edmonton City Council. Was politics something that you've always had an interest in?
I think it's safer to say that politics was something that always had an interest in me. Just as, politics has an interest in all Indigenous people. From the moment we're born, they decide who we can be. And, the Indian Act is one of the only race-based legislations on the planet. And so I think that Indigenous people, whether they like it or not, are already thrust into politics from the moment they take their first breath. And again, I thought, okay, well, if that's going to be the case, then how can I put my energy into making things much better for Indigenous folks? And some people were like, oh, you're only going to be caring about Indigenous people. But if you knew Indigenous culture, you know that if we can help the people who are struggling the most, we end up helping everyone. And so that was my goal, that, by looking at is the system failing the people who have it the worst, if we can fix that, we make it better all the way up the line. And so that's what I work on still today.
Yeah, I really love that bit that you had talk about there about the Indigenous people being the most politicized group of people right from their first breath. Councillor Paquette, more to talk about here. We do just have to step aside for one more quick break, and then we'll continue the conversation with artist, author, and politician Aaron Paquette. Stick around. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guest this week is artist, author, and politician Aaron Paquette. And Councillor Paquette, you've been pretty open over the years with your own mental health struggles as a younger person. What was it that has helped you move past that and succeed in so many different areas?
Well, I'll tell you, when I was 19 years old, I walked out to the middle of the high-level bridge in Edmonton, and I thought about whether or not I could continue to exist. It was just so painful. Lots of different things had happened, and it was all rooted in being Indigenous and in poverty. And it had just gotten to a point where I didn't see myself as having a place in the world. But as I was standing on that bridge and I had my eyes closed, I remember the sun rising, and it felt like a touch on my face, the heat of the sun, like someone was actually like gently caressing me. And I heard like a whisper, in the back of my mind saying, "We're here to laugh." And I remember that was the words that I had heard so much from the old people in our community, and their laughter and their resilience. And as soon as I realized that, in that moment, I started to cry. But I got off that bridge and had hope for the first time that I could remember. And so I would say that it is the resilience, the beauty, the laughter of our communities that really gave me strength and really gave me the hope and the belief that maybe I do have a place in this world. And I share this story because there may be some young people out there who are feeling the same way. And I want them to know that I've been there. And everyone's journey and everyone's story is different. But one thing that is the same is that none of us are alone. There's always someone there rooting for us. And if people are saying, well, yeah, right, I am alone. I'm going to tell you right now, I don't know you, and I may not have met you, but I'm rooting for you, and I believe in you, and I want you to have the best life possible. And the best way to do that is to reach out to other people. That's the thing that destroys people and communities, is when we don't reach out to each other. So please reach out.
Councillor Paquette, a great message there, and one that we'll have to leave it on for the show this week, unfortunately, but a great one indeed. We didn't even get to talk about, how you're an award-winning author as well. You went on to do. We're all better off that you came down that day. Councillor Paquette, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
That's all the time we have for this week on Face to Face. I'm Dennis Ward. We'll see you back here in 7 days.